Okay, awesome. Hopefully everyone can hear us and settled in. Just want to say hi, a quick hi to everyone. Thank you for joining us as we continue our Diamond Mine web series with this installation of maximizing your purchase card program. My name is Michael Foster and I'm a senior marketing specialist here at Diamond Mines, and I'm joined today by our resident payment card expert, Sheldon Roberts. Sheldon, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right, good to hear. Sheldon will be walking us through tips and tricks on optimizing your purchase card program. Whether you're thinking about a PCard program or have had one for a while and just want to learn more, we hope this webinar will provide valuable information for everyone. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Sheldon to get this started.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's PCard webinar. We have a number of attendees who are already Diamond Mine PCard program users. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Sheldon Roberts. I'm Diamond Mine's purchase card specialist. I've been with Diamond Mine for just over 3 years now, and I work with all of our PCard accounts, starting with the initial onboarding process through the account setup steps, day-to-day account matters, and program growth and continuing PCard education. So we're scheduled for a 30-minute webinar today, and we'll move briskly through our topics. I'll ask that anyone that has questions relating to any of the material that we cover today, please write them down and have them ready for our Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions that pertain specifically to your account, I'd ask that you contact me offline after the webinar for those. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we're here today to discuss 2 topics. What is a purchase card and how it can benefit your school? And once you have a purchase card program in place, how do you get the most out of it? For those of you who are current PCard users, just bear with me for the first few slides. I know that it may be a little bit of a refresher course, but once we get into some of the later slides, we'll be talking about best practices and how to grow your program. So before we get into exactly what a purchase card is and the benefits it can add to your school, we need to understand what a typical purchasing cycle looks like without a card solution in place. So here we have what a typical standard manual payment process looks like. Many of you are familiar with this if you previously didn't have a purchase card program, and for those of you who don't have a purchase card program now, where you're using or you have employees or staff or faculty who are using their own personal cards to make payments. So for instance, maybe the school needs to buy paper or something like that, or supplies, and you send someone out to do that, and then another person needs something else and they do those things. Once we get right around step 4 is when the business officer is looking for things like expense reports or for receipts, and things start to get a little confusing when people either can't find those or can't remember to turn those in, or maybe somebody's used their personal card and they've put too much on their card and maybe they can't pay their bills then and they're waiting for that reimbursement. And so by the time we get to step 8, we've got really quite the bit of a situation where, again, employees or staff are waiting for reimbursements, the business office is waiting for documentation, and it's a completely antiquated process and everybody's wondering or asking or yelling, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. So enter the purchase card solution. So what is a purchase card? A purchase card is an efficient and flexible form of business credit card that is paid off month by month and allows for better controls, limits, and visibility than other types of credit cards. So as you look to streamline your PCard, or when you're getting ready to start a purchase card program, you really want to ask yourself a few questions before you get started. Some things might be like, are you receiving tuition and other school programs online? And if so, how long has this payment acceptance method been in place? Again, when you're looking to streamline online services at the school, doing the same thing for your purchasing solutions, really it only makes sense to do that as well. If you're using manual systems, is the reason because, well, this is just the way that we've always done it. We've always had folks just use their own personal cards and get reimbursed, or we write POs and we just wait and we pay those. So really, we're in the digital era now, and we want to be thinking about how to move all of our systems either online or streamline and make effective payment decisions. So when processes become highly optimized, that's when we really move away from that manual process that takes a long time. Some other things that you want to ask yourself are about how many non-payroll checks are written each month or year, and then what percentage of those checks are below $500. And there's a specific reason we ask that. And that's if you're making payments to merchants and vendors, there's really no reason to pay them using a check or ACH. Again, we're in the digital era now, so we really want to be moving away from that type of process, unless, of course, the only method that they accept is a paper check or an ACH form or a PO. Paying with a purchase card, though, it gives the business office the greatest level of control, flexibility, visibility, while significantly reducing the time to complete purchases. And again, coming back to this idea of when checks are below $500, sorry about that. One thing that we want to think about again is because if you're making a lot of smaller dollar transactions, these typically don't require multiple levels of approval before purchasing, and this is where P-cards really shine. And lastly, we want to think about what the average cost of a purchase order is and how many hours a week, month, or year would you estimate is spent on payment reconciliation. So really what we're talking about is the business office time to complete from the time the need for a payment or the need to procure goods or services comes about until actually reconciling that, and how much time it takes to actually complete that process. So when we're thinking about these last two items, you'll really want to consider the PO life cycle, again, and the time it takes for the business office to manage those things. So before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to say, so everyone that's in the business office, as we know, your top goals should really be to always really streamline payments, reduce the amount of time and resources it takes to procure goods and services. And using P-cards is really a great way to turn AP headaches into an efficient system that works for the business office and for staff and employees. So real quick, we'll just go through some of the numbers. So some of you may be familiar with this. You may be looking at some of these and saying, yes, that's me, that's us. So depending on the size of the school that don't have a purchase card program in place, you can end up writing up to 16,000 checks per year. And the majority of those payments are really geared towards those lower, again, under $500 transactions, with those recurring payments that are time intensive and they build up throughout the year. Again, a purchase card solution really helps to solve a lot of those. The average cost of processing a purchase order manually costs anywhere between $75 and $200, and automating that procurement process reduces that cost to about $10 to $40. And again, this is coming back specifically to the necessity of the time from the time it starts with needing to purchase something until that reconciliation process is complete, the number of employees that are involved with that and the hours that go into that. And again, so when the payment method is switched from a traditional processing, again, with those manual processes requiring the cardholders to actually use their own cards, their personal information, and then be reimbursed, that purchasing process, the efficiency savings range anywhere from 55 to 80% of the traditional processing cost there. All right, so let's take a look at some of the reasons why a school should get a purchase card. One, we want to offer better cost control. We want to reduce administrative time, and we want to encourage cost reductions. So when we look at payment controls, we really want to have a program in place where we can customize purchase parameters. And we also want to be able to have online management tools where it's easy to view invoices, reports, and purchasing limits. So every business office really wants control of their programs. Purchase, and the P-card really allows you to set limits that make sense for the school and the cardholder. I can say that when folks typically call me and say, hey, Sheldon, we'd like a P-card, but here's the thing. We want the business office to have control over these cards. We're not sure if we're ready to really trust our cardholders or our employees with that responsibility yet. That's where purchase cards really come into play, because we can do things like set specific limits on cards for accounts for specific vendors and merchants. So it gives you that control that you need. And then also the ability to view that information in real time online. So instead of having to wait until the end of the billing cycle when your invoice comes or waiting for cardholder statements, you're able to see that information at any time. So if cardholders need assistance with anything, you can certainly just log in and be able to access that information. So other things that we want to look at too in terms of is just saving time and money, and we've already touched on this a number of times, but again, moving from a traditional manual process with the cardholders using their own cards, you actually end up saving up to 80% of your, and there's a cost reduction there. We also want to look at incentivizing purchasing. So we're talking about adding additional revenue through the business office by using purchase cards. So really, in terms of rebates and rewards, there are lots of options out there. Some programs will offer a cash rebate, others will offer travel rewards or points. I think everybody that I've ever talked to about purchase card always asks about those, and it's good. You should be thinking about those things. So you really want to understand your schools and the business office need, and it's what the importance is there when deciding which incentives matter. We here at Diamond Mine, we've kind of found that cash is king, in just that folks really like a cash deposit directly into their bank account. But it could be different for your school. Maybe you do a lot of traveling, and so travel rewards are important, or maybe different types of points that accrue over time that you can get different goods and services for. Those may work better for you. Again, just from our area of expertise, we found that the cash deposit, which you can use for travel and other goods and services, it typically makes the most sense for our schools. And lastly, one of the things is reduced paperwork. So a big issue before purchase cards is really those 1099 filings for all of the transactions, which can be just a logistical nightmare for the business office. Anybody that's doing that now, when using a purchase card, those filings are done by the merchant and not the school. So if we take just a second to think about that, again, that process that you have in place for doing any of those 1099 filings, that completely goes away. So if you're doing that now, just think about the time that you'll save just by removing that step alone. All right, moving right along here. So here we see some common uses of P-cards in schools. So obviously we talked about things like travel, purchasing things like computers, paying for utilities, renovations or construction, teacher faculty supplies, legal and accounting services, furniture, and fuel. Now, some of these may seem pretty obvious. Obviously, things like the travel or teacher faculty supplies, maybe fuel. Some things may be less obvious, like utilities or renovation and construction. But we found that when schools take their traditional purchasing process and move it over to a P-card, it makes things much easier, again, having that visibility into the card program, either being able to set up recurring payments through virtual cards, or also instead of having to pay upfront for something, use the purchase card for things like renovation, building a new building. And then also, even with the fuel aspect, when we look at this one here, I have a number of schools that actually have fuel-only cards. So that means that the merchant category codes are locked down for all other types of purchases. They hand them out to their bus drivers, and the bus drivers just use them to pay at the pump. And the business office has that security or peace of mind, knowing that these maybe part-time employees who have school credit cards can only use them for a specifically designated purchase. All right, so how does it work? How does the purchase card work? So let's take a look. If we look at this chart, we can see that once the card holder has a card, they simply go to a merchant or a vendor and use the card there. Once they have that, they'll have their receipt information. They'll be able to take that, and depending on the school's process, they may be able to use an online system to then upload that information into the system. The business office receives that information so they can see it as well. The business office is able to then take that information, and then once you have an invoice, make a payment, and that statement data is also provided to both the business office and to the card holder. So I know that one of the things that many people have on their minds is really, how do we simplify the process with the card holders? And we can talk about that a little bit more later, and then also in the Q&A section. But really, we want to be thinking about, again, really understanding our card holders and knowing what they need. And in that case, sometimes it's an online system, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a hybrid of a manual paper process in terms of putting codes on the expense reports and things like that, and then handing them in directly to the business office. We can talk about all of those options, and again, it's really what works best for the school and for the card holders. So now that we understand some of the P-card basics, let's talk about setting things up. So this applies for both new and existing PCard account holders. So for those of you who don't have PCard yet, these are some great things to keep in mind. And for everybody out there that's kind of been bearing with me through these last few slides and you already have PCard, let's take a look again and see if you've really optimized these areas for your own program. So when getting started, the first thing that we want to do is we want to plan ahead. We want to develop internal policies and procedures to really manage our program. We want to define roles and responsibilities for the program, and we want to make sure that the policies and forms that we have in place, such as cardholder agreements or card checkout forms, are available. Another thing we really want to do is you want to know who should get cards and when, and the program doesn't have to be set up all at one time. I can't tell you the number of times when we've had folks stall the PCard program, they want to get started and it stops, and then they're interested, somebody leaves, somebody comes and goes, and they say, well, Sheldon, we've got to wait until the summer, now we've got to wait till the fall or the spring just to get something started. There's really no sense in holding off on adding the PCards just because a few people aren't ready to get on board. Obviously, we want to have the key decision makers on board with that, but in terms of card holders and other things, we're waiting for people, we can certainly get started on that process, and you want to be thinking about that as you plan, and that we can add and grow that later. We want to empower and educate employees. So this means things like issuing individual cards to everyone that incurs expenses. You can also use department cards where appropriate. The nice thing about using PCards is typically you can, again, either issue them to a single person, you can issue them to a group of people, or you can do it by a particular role or have some sort of checkout card where folks come and they actually ask for the card, they sign off, they make their purchases, they bring back their documentation, and they check the card back in. So you also want to do things like train your staff, again, on online expense tracking, expense management, and cardholder responsibilities. You want to do things like really, one, you want to let folks know that the PCards are coming. You don't want to shock your cardholders or your staff or employees into that. All of a sudden they have a card, they don't know what to do with it. So start to build up to that when you're really thinking about introducing that program, or if something's happening with their card and they're getting a new card, you want to make sure that people know about that. Folks are typically really excited when they find out that they're going to get a company card, not so that they can go out and just make any old purchase, but mainly because so that they don't have to use their own card anymore. And I'm sure that the folks that have our card program in place now or an existing card program in place can attest to that. So the other thing that you really want to do is make sure that your cardholders know their limits. So many times I get calls throughout the day and folks say, hey Sheldon, our their card is being declined and we don't know why, what's happening. And we take a look at it and it's just something as simple as their limit has been exceeded. So we put a limit in place, or the school put a limit in place for the card, but the cardholder didn't know what that limit was, so it was exceeded. We want to make sure that they understand those things, and that they want to understand that having a purchase card is a privilege and not a right. I find that one of the easiest ways to manage that is actually business offices will block the card if the cardholder is not doing what they're supposed to do, whether it be making purchases they're not supposed to make, or if they are not turning in their documentation on time. Again, just as easily as a PCard is given, it can be taken away. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I wanted to touch on it again. We really want to be thinking about customized controls. As we look at a company-wide program, we really want to be thinking about aligning and adjusting those limits with each user's needs and over time. So this means that what works today may not work tomorrow. We may need to add additional limits. We may need to adjust cards. We also want to make sure that we're using the tools that we have available to us to access that information. So daily reporting and real-time transaction history will really help your program shine, so that when your cardholders have questions, they can come to you directly, or when you have questions, you can reach out to us here at Diamond Mind, and we can certainly help with all of those things. Another thing that we want to look at is also grouping cards as needed. So this would just be in terms of delegating responsibilities to department heads if we needed to do something like that. Again, just making sure that everybody has what they need and they know their responsibilities. This one here is a big one, and I probably could spend so much time talking about this, but I'm only going to just use one slide here. But we really, really want to be thinking about eliminating paperwork. So we want to simplify the expense tracking and reporting, whatever your process is. We want to understand what that looks like, and we want to try to move as much online as possible. It's not always possible, but we want to make sure that wherever we can, we're doing that. So if it's something like using a multi-tier approval process, something like Smart Data or another expense reporting system, we can certainly do that. Making it easy for cardholders to either access or upload receipts for the business office to have the ability to view those. We certainly want that as well. And again, we talked a little bit about the responsibility for the 1099 reporting, and that pretty much that goes away with purchase cards. So we don't have to think about that anymore. So one thing that I do want to really touch on, though, is coming back to the knowing your card holders and what I really mean by that. So we all have one or two card holders out there that we just cannot get them to do what they're supposed to do. I'm sure that a couple of people are probably nodding their head right now thinking about, what do I do with these folks? How do I get them to either use their card correctly or to submit their information on time? So we want to think about those folks, and sometimes we do have to show those people just a little extra love and attention, but we want to make it as easy as possible for even those users. I like to call them special characters, by providing them with the tools that they need. That also helps the business office as well. So when you're thinking about your process, you really want to be thinking about, again, how you can make it easy for the card holders. We also want to look into how we can easily transfer data into your accounting system. So every school has some sort of accounting system that they're using to track both accounts receivable and accounts payable. So with that, we really want to be thinking about how we can make this process easier. And again, if there's a manual process in place where you've got cardholder statements everywhere, you're printing things off and sending them to people and waiting for them to get back to you, there's an easier way to do that. And I wish I could tell you how many times folks have called me and said, Sheldon, it takes me so many hours to do our reconciliation. Is there any way you can help? And I just ask, well, what are you doing now? And we go through this process, and I say, well, have you looked at this report or maybe this file or this type here? And they say, oh, I didn't even know I had access to that. And within the span of maybe a 15-minute conversation, we've completely revamped the reconciliation process and saved the business office hours and hours of time that it typically took to complete that process. So once we have all of those things in place, we really want to think about how we can expand usage as well. So we want to make PCard the default payment method. If folks are making purchases for the school, you really want them to be using the purchase card. And if you have questions about that in terms of which merchants or vendors accept credit cards, you can actually review the list of most common credit card acceptors by independent schools. You can visit us right here at www.diamondmineinc.com/acceptors. So this will really help you to get a better understanding of who will take a credit card, and then you can start to move those processes in that to, instead of either that PO or that manual check process, to the purchase cards. So one last thing that I did want to say about that is that, really all purchase card programs should be growing. And maybe you started out your program with just one or two cards or a handful of cards. Maybe they were originally intended for special occasions or travel. But what you really want to be thinking about, again, is how you can grow the program, who will accept credit cards, what other staff and faculty are trusted to or can be entrusted to use a company card, so that you can move a lot of those old processes, again, with the manual purchasing or employee reimbursements, and move that towards a PCard program. And you'll find when you do that, you start to make not only the business office happy, but your cardholders or staff or employees happy as well. So maximizing monetary benefits. This is another question that I get pretty frequently here, and we really want to be thinking about not only how we can make it easy for the school to make purchases, but also how the school can be rewarded for doing that as well. So one of the things that we look at is cash back, and we talked about that earlier. Really, cash is king, and just kind of maximizing your cash back options, again, whether it be with more frequent payments, such as going from monthly billing to semi-monthly billing, and then also having an automatic invoice process where maybe you're paying via auto pay, so you make sure that you don't ever have any missed or late payments. Really, when I look at it through my research and the things that I found and talking to many schools, any PCard program that's worth looking at, one, it's free to use, and it pays you or the business office in some way to use it. So even if the rebate isn't really your primary concern, as the business office, we should always be thinking about all avenues to generate revenue. And you're going to have to make purchases anyway, so you might as well get paid for it. So as we begin to wrap up, I'd like to take just a moment to do a quick comparison between our Diamond Mine purchase card program and most other corporate credit card programs. So our card program has no annual fees, no per card fees, no personal guarantee required, no minimum spend requirement, no minimum or maximum credit limit, and we're focused specifically on schools. We also don't have per card fees. So our goal really is to make a purchasing card program as easy and accessible to you as we can make it. So one of the other things, and I'm probably bragging just a little bit here, but if you talk to some of the other folks who already have our PCard, they'll let you know that your purchase card program also comes with myself. Again, I'm our purchase card specialist. I work, again, with all of our PCard accounts to assist in any way that you need. And we've really found, our schools have found that one-to-one relationship, when you have situations maybe like card holders on travel or in need of a higher limit, maybe a temporary credit increase, or just somebody to talk to about a quick consultation. Or if you're just planning that next big step with the program, it's really invaluable. There are so many times when people call me up literally just to talk, and they just want to let me know what's going on with the program, or I'll reach out to them just to find out what's going on with the program, and again, how we can streamline things, how we can grow things, make things better. So we find that that's super valuable there. So like I've kind of said before, I mean, there really are a lot of purchase card programs out there. Most of them are a dime a dozen. You can Google anything, purchase cards, and anything will come up. But Diamond Mine is the only PCard program that's specifically focused on independent schools. So we're payment experts for both accounts payable and accounts receivable. We get your needs, and we're here to help. One of the things, I'll just speak on a quick personal note, the major benefits of working with a card program that specializes in the independent school community is that I get to work with all of you. So at Diamond Mine, we have over 300 schools across the nation that use our purchase card program. That doesn't even take into account our merchant services accounts that we have. But what this means is that we really see and understand what you're doing and what you need. And when you become part of the Diamond Mine family, as many of you can attest to, we encourage you not only to contact us when you have questions, but also to contact each other, because schools understand school needs. And we're always happy to use our network and our know-how to help you. All right, so this will actually conclude the presentation portion of the webinar. I'd like to open up the floor now to anyone who has questions. Again, I'd ask for all of you current PCard account holders, if you have any questions that are specific to your account, including open items, I just again ask that you please contact me directly after the webinar so we can go through those things together. But for all general PCard questions, you can go ahead and type them now, and I'll answer them in the order that they're received. All right, so the first question is, how do the cash rebates work, and is there a cash rebate for every purchase? So this is actually a really good question, specifically because it really depends on the purchase card program that you're using. So I'll specifically talk about our Diamond Mine program, if that's okay. So we set it up. We want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for you to earn cash back on your purchases that you make. And it's really broken up into 3 areas. So the first is going to be your monthly volume. So depending on how much you spend, then it depends on your cashback amount. The second piece is going to be your billing cycle. So the more frequently you pay, the higher your cashback is going to be. So what this means is that we offer 3 different types or 3 different billing cycles. There's going to be monthly, semi-monthly, which is twice a month, and then weekly. So again, the more frequently you pay, the higher your cash rebate option is going to be there. And then the last factor there is going to be your payment terms. So traditionally we had a 7-day payment term, which just means that you have your invoice, and then after that there were 7 days to submit the payment. But we've actually opened that up to both 14-day payment terms, which gives you a longer payment cycle, and then we've also given the option to decrease that to 1-day payment terms. So both of those affect the rebate as well. The 14-day payment terms will actually lower the rebate, and the 1-day payment terms will actually increase that. All right, we have quite a number of questions here, so I'll try to make sure that I can get to as many of those as I can. The next one here is, can you automatically debit our bank account for payment? The answer is quite simply yes. We do. That is the encouraged payment method that we have here at Diamond Mine, is just auto pay. And again, the main reason for that is we understand schools' needs, and that we want to make sure that, again, when you're out of the office, it's summer break, winter break, spring break, something happens, we don't want anyone to miss a payment or have a late payment because of one of those scenarios. So we definitely encourage auto pay, but we also offer online bill pay where you can pay directly through the system. You can also do an ACH payment through your bank. You can write a check, or you can do a wire payment as well. So we have many different payment options, but again, we do encourage auto pay. So the next question is about transferring data into the accounting system. Somebody specifically asked about Blackbaud. So there are a number of ways to do this, and it really depends, again, on what works best for you or for the business office. So typically what we're going to be looking at is a custom file type. So Blackbaud has its own proprietary software, so there's not a direct link or upload into Blackbaud. Or really most accounting softwares, there's not going to be that, maybe for QuickBooks if you're using a specific type or version. But typically what we want to do is we want to actually create a custom file type. I've done this for many schools, so we just ask the accounting software provider, what information do you need so that we can transfer information into the system? And then we have a quick consultation. We talk about all of those areas, things that are important, and then we go through and we set that up together. It's typically an Excel or a CSV file. We get that into the format that you need. We can set that up to automatically run depending on how we're actually doing this, whether you're generating the report or you're using an expense reporting tool like Smart Data, and then we can take that information and transfer it into the accounting software. All right, so the next question is, can you talk about the way that cardholders can access accounts online and enter coding and upload receipts? This is another really good question here. Basically, really everything that we've been talking about here in terms of streamlining your payment process. So through Diamond Mine, we worked with MasterCard and Comdata, and they provided us with a tool called Smart Data. So this is one of many tools that can be used in terms of this reconciliation process or completing the payment process. Typically what this looks like is going to be the account holder has access to this online system. There's going to be everything it's already been set up either by the school or by Diamond Mine or your provider, and what will happen is you're going to have access to those departments, account numbers, whether they're subledgers, project IDs, funds, things like that. They will be able to log into the system and they'll see a list of their transactions. They will then be able to actually access that information, edit it, such as adding an expense note there, so what the purchase was for, or maybe where it was, who was with the cardholder, or maybe it was a dinner party or something like that, and they need to add the list of attendees. They would certainly be able to do that. Then they can select maybe which department they're affiliated with, and then any account number or GL code that goes along with that, and also add a receipt to that. If they have the file, either it's on their desktop or their mobile device, they'd be able to add that information in, and then they can actually, the business office can then see that information. They can mark it as approved. If they need to make any changes, the business office would be able to do that as well. And again, once we have all that information, this actually comes back to the question that I answered previously about the custom file. Typically, we're using something like that to then take all of the data that we've stored from the cardholder transactions, all of their expense-related issues, and then uploading that into the accounting software. So I have one final question that I want to answer. We do have everyone's questions listed here and who's asked them, so we'll make sure that we come back and we do answer all those questions. I apologize, we are running a little late here on time. I wanted to just answer one last question here, and it was just, do you have any tips on getting cardholders to complete the online coding? So I actually do here. Again, one of the nice things about working with so many schools is I get to have lovely conversations with everybody about what they do, what their process is like. And with that, I found that some of the easiest ways to really get cardholders to complete their coding is to actually incentivize them. So we want to make the cardholders just as much a part of the program as the business office is. So when doing that, we might want to think about things like having a small contest, like who can get their expenses submitted on time, or maybe if you get your expenses submitted on time, maybe your name gets into a hat quarterly or something like that, and then you can win some small prize, maybe movie tickets or something like that. Now this might sound a little outlandish to some folks, but if you think about that for just a second, if you've experienced anything of what it's like to have to chase folks around for receipts or to make them do their coding, $15 movie tickets is probably worth it. So I've seen lots of different things, and if people have questions specifically about that or how to optimize that process, I'd love to go into more detail about that question. But it's one of the big ones that I have. We always talk about, I jokingly say the baseball bat method, which is just chasing people around trying to get them to do what they're supposed to do. But there are lots of options out there, and we can certainly go through all of those together. So these have really all been really great questions. This actually concludes our webinar for now. Again, just to let you know that anybody that has asked questions, we will make sure to follow up with those. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and my contact information is here for anyone who doesn't already have it. Please feel free to reach out to me directly at any time. I want to thank Michael as well for helping me host this webinar today. And again, please feel free to reach out at your convenience. Thanks so much.